Hello, in this video we're going to make a clone of the infamous game Donkey.Bass. This is a very simple game written by none other than Bill Gates himself, who is one of the world's richest men. So no matter how your games start out, there's always a chance for success. The game was actually written to demo the capabilities of MS-DOS, Microsoft DOS, which was the first operating system that Microsoft released. It's a very simple game, and we can watch it here. You're just a little, what could generously be called a race car, and there's a donkey that's coming down from the top of the screen, and you just have to dodge it. You can only go left and right, and every time the donkey hits the bottom of the screen, the car goes up one, and it just keeps repeating until you hit the donkey. And well, let's just watch the guy crash here, which will happen eventually, and the car will kind of split into pieces. There we go. So that's what we're going to make. And of course, what are we going to do? What are we going to use to make this? We are going to use one of the most powerful 3D engines that we have available to us. So let's open up Unity here, and I'm going to make a new project, and I'm going to call it Donkey Demo. You can just call yours Donkey. I already have a Donkey project, so I'm just going to call mine Donkey Demo. And you want to set the template to 2D. We want this to be a 2D project. So Donkey Demo or Donkey, either way, Donkey, I guess. Select 2D as the template, and your path should be set fine by default. You do not need to add any extra packages. If you downloaded stuff through the asset store and you wanted to just start off a new project and incorporate stuff you'd already downloaded or purchased, you could do that through here. And do not enable analytics. We just don't need to. It's going to be just annoying. So just keep it simple. So then click Create Project, and Unity is going to sit here spinning its wheels for a while and eventually come back with a project. So now that Unity has created a project, you'll notice we get this kind of blank interface here. And down here at the bottom left, this is where we can manage our assets. And this panel over here, these are things that are in our scene. Right now, all we have is the main camera. We don't have anything in our scene. And notice if I click on the main camera, now I can manipulate the properties of that object. Right? I can change these things here in the interface, or I could change them in code that I might add later. And we've got kind of a scene view here of things that that are actually in our game right now. So this is kind of what we would see. Game view is kind of what you'd see running the game, and the scene view kind of lets you kind of pan around and look at the scene from different positions. So now let's add the resources that we're going to need. There are not many resources. You can get them off of Schoology or off of the T drive. There's just a couple of images that we're going to use. And one of the things that's very important with Unity is keeping your assets organized. I learned that very early on. So, and dog is drinking. That is great. The joys of a home recording studio. So one of the most helpful things that I can tell you from a workflow perspective is in your assets folder down here, you want to create new folders to contain all of your different things, like your scripts, your textures, your sound effects, your shaders, your animations, whatever, your prefabs. Put them all into folders. Otherwise, if you just leave them all in here, you're going to have a million things. It's going to be impossible to find anything. So let's start by creating a new folder here, and let's call it Sprites. We could call it Textures. It doesn't really matter. And then let's also, since we're in here, let's make another one called Scripts. Let's make all I did was right-click, create a folder, and we'll call it Scripts. Maybe later we'll need one called Sounds. I don't know. Let's add one, create folder. Let's call it Sounds. All right. I don't know if we're going to need sounds later. We'll find out. So, because I can't remember if I added sounds or not. All right. So let's go into the Sprites folder now, and let's go add in our images. So we can. When you have a blank folder like this, you can actually open this in the Explorer. We have Show in Explorer, and it'll pull up that window, and then we can go in here and we can kind of drag stuff in that we might need, or we can right-click here and we can import stuff one at a time. So we could say Import New Asset. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say Import New Asset, and then I'm going to go to my resources that I downloaded for this project, which for me are in Documents, Teaching, Unity, and let me go into donkey, and then see, I've got assets. Okay, so I've got a cow. We've got cow, eat, race car. Let's add these three things here. Let's just import them all. There we go. So there's now the one that we want to manipulate here is the race car. So notice that now we've got our stuff kind of nicely organized here. And if you're wondering what this little slider does here, it allows you to kind of, you know, maybe I kind of like to be able to see what this stuff is. You know, when it gets too small, it's like can't really. I don't know. I don't really like that. I like to be able to kind of see what it is. All right, so now we can go in and we can kind of manipulate these different sprites and configure them the way we need them to be. And so I guess these really technically aren't sprites. They're kind of textures. Every system's got its own terminology. So you can there's all sorts of different ways to use images in Unity. And what we're going to do is turn these into 2D textures that we're then going to put on a sprite. So kind of it counterintuitively or different from other systems, the objects in our game are going to be called sprites, and we're going to put textures on them. Usually, you know, I think of creating objects and we put sprites on the objects. The terminology in Unity is just a little bit different. But let's click on our race car here, and you'll see that we've got a whole bunch of different texture types. We want to leave this as sprite, a 2D and user interface. We want to leave that as set to 2D. And user interface, because that'll allow us to put this thing on an object in our game. So I mean, that's really all we need to do to our race car sprite. Now what we can do is actually put this sprite on an object. So how do we put an object into our scene? Well, we can right click here on this blank area and we can pick different object types, or you could do it from assets, create. You could do it from up here. Sorry, game objects, you could do it from up here. We could create a 2D object, sprite. That's what we want to do. It doesn't matter whether we do it from up here or whether we do it from here. Let's just do it from here. Let's create a 2D object, sprite. And now you see we have an object, and this object has a position and rotation and a scale. This is very similar to 3ds Max. Every object had position, rotation, scale. Things in a 3D game have position, rotation, and scale, right? So to move this thing around, you go into that object using, and you say, like, you know, player dot transform dot position, right? So the players transforms position, the players transforms scale. All of these things that you see here are just exposing variables that exist in this object right here. These are all properties you can change. You can change them here in the interface. You can also change them within the code. So let's rename this object here. Let's rename this player. So I'm going to right click on the object and I'm going to rename it to player. I could also do that up here. I could also change the name up here in the inspector panel. Let me right click on this guy and I'll say rename, and I'm going to name him player. Now, there's one other thing we have to do that's very, very important, and that is we have to set the tag on the player. Now, tags are kind of almost exactly what they sound like. Imagine a sticky name tag where you go to some, you go to some meeting, some event that you've never been to before, and they make everybody wear a name tag. That's exactly what a name tag is in Unity. It's just a label you stick on something so you can find it later, or you know what something is. And up here at the top right is where you can set the tag. There are some tags that are already built in. Player is one that we use very, very frequently, but we can make our own later, and we will. So if we wanted new tags, we can click on that, and we could add new tags, but we don't want to do that. We just want to set the tag on the player to player. And that's going to allow us later to make a controller object, and the controller object can say, find me the player. And how does it look up the player? Using the tag, right? You can find objects using their tags. So there's our player object. Okay, so I think we're good with the player right now, and what I'll do is I'm gonna stop recording, and then in the next video we'll make some of the other sprites. We'll keep the chunks small so it makes it easy to get them done, and you won't lose your place. And if I mess up, then I don't have to redo the whole thing. So the next video we'll get the cow in here. The cow is much more complicated. Not much more complicated, but the cow is animated unlike the player. So we're going to do some other stuff with our sprites. Well, okay, so I'll see you in the next video.